Today, Matt Walsh Show, Zohran Mamdani makes his final argument, which is that we should feel sorry for him because he and his fellow Muslims are the real victims of 9/11. Also, the media panics over White House renovations for some reason. And I get into a heated battle with an extremely creepy AI version of myself. And also, I will respond to Mamdani's three major policy proposals. Each one is crazier and more doomed to fail than the last. All of that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Let's be honest, most dress clothes are uncomfortable, high maintenance, and just don't feel good to wear. You spend too much time ironing, dry cleaning, and tugging at stiff fabrics. That's why I love Mizzen and Main. They make classic menswear with performance fabrics, so looking sharp doesn't have to be a hassle. These guys actually invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they've been perfecting it ever since with modern fabrics that really deliver. Their shirts and pants look refined and professional. But here's the thing, they're also stretchy, lightweight, moisture wicking, and wrinkle resistant. Everything's completely machine washable, so no more ironing or dry cleaning runs. So they completely did away with the worst part about dressing nice. As a busy guy with a family, that's a game changer. They sent me some of their shirts a couple weeks ago, and I've been wearing all of their shirts very consistently. And I do really appreciate the fact that I don't have to iron. Not that I ever really did to begin with, but now I don't iron, and I also don't look homeless when I wear their really beautiful shirts. The moment you put their clothes on, you feel the difference. You get that professional style without sacrificing comfort, whether you're in the office, traveling for work, or even just out on the weekend. It's timeless style you can invest in once and enjoy for years, which is why thousands of guys swear by Mizzen and Main when they want to look great without all the hassle. I love my Mizzen and Main clothes. The quality's great. My favorite part, though, is it looks ready to wear after being cleaned. And as I said, I don't look like a homeless person. Right now, Mizzen and Main is offering our listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com. Promo code Walsh20. That's Mizzen and Main, spelled Mizzen, and Main, MAIN.com. Promo code Walsh20 for 20% off. Mizzenandmain.com. Promo code Walsh20. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. 6 days after Islamic terrorists murdered thousands of Americans on September 11th, as many victims remained unaccounted for and as rescue workers continued cutting through the rubble, George W. Bush spoke at the Islamic Center of Washington. The president stated that the terrorist attacks, although they were committed by Islamists in the name of Islam, had actually contradicted the fundamental tenets of the faith because, as he put it, quote, Islam is peace. Bush also affirmed that Muslims in the United States, quote, love America just as much as I do. Ask any historian and they'll tell you that it's actually Bush's Axis of Evil speech delivered 5 months later at the State of the Union, which was the defining neoconservative speech of that era, the one that launched the global war on terrorism and established its objectives. But that's actually not true. It's not even close to true. The real goal of the neoconservative movement from 2001 onward was spelled out at the Islamic Center of Washington by George W. Bush, as Ground Zero was still smoldering. That speech made it official. Neoconservatives were not going to defeat anti-American evil abroad. Instead, in response to 9/11, they would accelerate their efforts to import this evil into the United States, on the theory, which they maintained in public with a straight face, that foreigners from the Middle East were just as American as anyone else. To be clear, Bush did not simply make the claim that al-Qaeda, along with millions of Muslims all over the world, had misunderstood the Quran's call to murder non-believers. Bush went much, much further than that. He declared that Muslims from foreign countries, most of whom advocate for Sharia law, are just as American as you are. Now, what happened next is almost never talked about, although it's one of the most important and catastrophic developments in the history of America, really. What happened is we didn't pause or end Muslim immigration to the United States. We didn't do that at all. In fact, we increased it dramatically in response to 9/11. Now, I want you to stop and really listen to what I'm about to tell you, because I think most people don't realize this. So here it is. Virtually the entire current Muslim population in the US came here after 9/11. So this is a chart from Data Hazard, which you can see up on your screen right now. In the 1990s, there were between 500,000 and 1 million Muslims in this country. That's it. Now there are more than 4.5 million. So put another way, in this country, the Muslim population has more than quadrupled since 9/11. Now, on the other hand, guess what's happened to the Christian population in Iraq during that same period? The country, we were supposedly liberating. Well, it went from 1.5 million Christians to around 200,000. Why is that? Well, they were ethnically cleansed. They were terrorized, they were killed, they were forced to leave. Meanwhile, some of our most important cities, the centers of our economy, were flooded with Muslims. And we were told to welcome these people and give them refuge from their third world hellholes because, after all, they're just as American as we are. But they just got here from a country that could not be more foreign to our own. As soon as they step off the plane, they're just as American as we are. So how have things turned out exactly? Nearly 25 years after 9/11, after several decades of unfettered neoconservatism and liberalism, what does New York City look like today? Well, as of 2024, more than 20% of the voters in New York City currently struggle to speak English. And that's not an exaggeration. It's from a document prepared by the Office of Immigrant Affairs in the mayor's office. And it says, quote, 22% of New Yorkers are considered to have limited language proficiency, limited English language proficiency to be exact. So think about that for a second. Again, really stop and think about it. 1 in 5 New Yorkers cannot speak the English language. 1 in 5 people in our largest and most important city cannot speak our language. We can't communicate. Pick a random person on the street in New York, and there's a good chance you won't be able to have a conversation with that person. Nor will you have any shared culture or shared history whatsoever. You will have nothing in common with this person, this quote unquote American. Overall, 38%, almost 40% of the population of New York was not born in America. It's not 40% are, ancestrally from another country. No, this is 40%. We're not born here. First generation. And of course, roughly 35% of these foreigners are unemployed and therefore completely dependent on the government for survival. And when I say dependent on the government, I mean, of course, dependent on the taxpayers. They're contributing nothing to this country or its economy. They come here and contribute nothing at all. They're just taking. They come here to take and to give nothing back. This is a demographic replacement that under the administrations of Bush and Obama was sold to the American people as a clear positive. After all, who wouldn't want more hardworking, peace-loving future Americans to move to this country and contribute their talents and work ethic to the advancement of Western civilization? Who wouldn't want that? That particular outcome was, of course, never going to happen. Instead, we have imported so many foreigners who despise this country and despise Christianity in particular that the next mayor of New York City is almost certainly going to be a Muslim socialist from Uganda who openly mocks the victims of 9/11. And to that end, the other day, this Muslim socialist, whose name is Zohran Mamdani, delivered his closing argument in the mayor's race. And listen to what that argument is.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City. I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Oh, wow. Poor woman. She's the real victim of 9/11. This is a line that Mamdani has trotted out in other contexts as well, including a video that his campaign put out, in which he complains that Muslims have been forced, quote, to endure hatred and bigotry in the shadows. So he really thinks this is a compelling argument. He's saying it's horrifying and sad that his aunt's tummy felt funny when she wore a hijab on the subway, shortly after Islamist terrorists murdered thousands of Americans and destroyed one of the most recognizable landmarks in the entire country. And not only that, he's blaming us for his aunt's feelings. He's not blaming the Muslim terrorists. He's not saying, well, these people made us all look bad. It's our fault. And Mamdani's aunt is the real victim here. This is that Norm Macdonald tweet you've probably seen before, but in real life. He's doing the joke. The one where he says, what terrifies me is if ISIS were to detonate a nuclear device and kill 50 million Americans, imagine the backlash against peaceful Muslims. Norm Macdonald would do the joke a lot better than that, but I mean, that's literally what, this is essentially the closing argument of the Mamdani campaign. Now, you can watch Mamdani's full remarks, and he never really gets around to mourning the thousands of Americans who were slaughtered at the hands of Al-Qaeda or explaining why they died, who killed them. He also never gets around to articulating any actual harm that his aunt supposedly suffered. You'd think if this were really a bigoted white supremacist hellhole, that someone would have actually done something to his aunt. It wouldn't all be in her head. It wouldn't just be, she didn't feel comfortable. It would be something happened to her. But it didn't. Nothing happened to her. Nor did it happen to anyone like Mamdani's aunt. Now, first of all, the story is almost certainly made up for political reasons. That's another point, and we all know that. It's completely unverifiable. It makes no sense. Additionally, there are now reports floating around that Mamdani has just one aunt who lived in Tanzania during 9/11, according to her LinkedIn, and who doesn't wear a hijab in photographs posted on social media. So that's a problem. And mainstream journalists aren't reporting this, of course. It comes from a random X account called Trinity Votes Blue. So whatever the truth may be, don't expect the Washington Post or PolitiFact to look into this for obvious reasons. Mamdani's a sociopath. He lies all the time. They know it. That's why they support him in the first place. And to be clear, he's not just lying about his aunt here. In that campaign video I mentioned earlier, Mamdani tries to claim that this is a bigger problem than his aunt. He says that Muslims are constantly antagonized in this country. Watch.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of the city. I want to speak to the memory of my aunt, who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab. I want to speak to the Muslim city worker, whether they teach in our schools or walk the beat for the NYPD. New Yorkers who all make daily sacrifices on behalf of the city only to see their leaders spit in their face. I want to speak to every child who grows up in New York marked as the other, who is randomly selected in a way that rarely feels random.
So there's a lot to dissect here. Mamdani constantly runs down this list of grievances that Muslims supposedly have against our country, a country that they have flocked to in record numbers. But the complaint about random screening that he always trots out is really the most incredible, because in reality, to this day, they make sure to screen elderly, white, disabled grannies at TSA just as much as they screen military-aged Arab males named Mohammed, even though 0% of the global terror threat comes from the white grannies, and 100% comes from military-aged Arab males. So this country has bent over backwards for the Zohran Mamdanis of the world. Muslims have been treated far better here and have been far more welcomed than any white American Christian would be in any Muslim country. In fact, Muslims have been treated better in the United States than they're treated in many Muslim countries. There was not any sort of campaign of persecution and oppression against Muslims after 9/11. In fact, the government went absurdly out of its way to avoid even the impression of such a thing. Our government responded to 9/11 by apologizing to Muslims and then importing millions of them into our cities and letting them build their mosques and blast their call to prayer over the loudspeakers at 5 a.m. That's the kind of persecution they've endured. The persecution of being welcomed here and given literally everything they want. with virtually no pushback whatsoever. And for all that effort, we don't even get so much as a thank you in return. Instead, they whine and complain and they denounce and accuse us, and they work every day to subvert our country and destroy everything that made us great. Now, in response, you'll often hear leftists argue that hate crimes against Muslims supposedly went up after 9/11, and they'll show you this chart of reported hate crimes. And there are about 1,000 different problems with their argument here. First of all, as we've discussed many times, reported hate crimes are a meaningless category. They don't mean anything. The idea of a hate crime itself is meaningless, but a reported hate crime is less than meaningless. Okay, a reported hate crime is when someone calls the police and claims that someone did something mean to them. It's not an arrest. It's not a persecution. It's not a prosecution. It's not a conviction. It's not anything that can be verified at all. It's just a report. It's a claim. So, for example, if Mamdani's aunt called the police and said somebody yelled at her for wearing a hijab, that would count. Even if it wasn't true, it would still count. So, by the definition of hate crime used there, roughly 95% of the hate crimes are just flat out fake. They're either misinterpreted by the victim, or the victim is calling them in to get sympathy, or whatever it is. And even given this definition, which is extremely overbroad, there were still fewer than 500 hate crime reports involving Muslim victims across the entire country in the aftermath of 9/11. So there was one hate crime report for every 5 people who burned to death or jumped out of a burning building or died in a plane crash on 9/11. That's how we should look at it. And we're supposed to be horrified by these numbers. Now compare those figures to other religious groups, and the narrative falls apart even further. Now, using the FBI's numbers from 2001 to 2012, hate crimes against Muslims were reported roughly as often as hate crimes against Christians, including Catholics and Protestants together. Jews are at the top of that list. And the category of other religions and multiple religions together reported more hate crimes than Muslims. Now, if you get back to the hate crime chart, you'll notice even more issues. So let's put that back up on the screen. It's pretty clear from the trajectory here that after the spike in reported hate crimes post 9/11, reports of hate crimes against Muslims plummeted, then went flat for the rest of the decade. And that's remarkable because, again, the Muslim population exploded during this period. So you'd think that the raw number of hate crimes against Muslims would go up simply as a matter of statistics, but the numbers didn't go up. In fact, they went down, and they stayed down. So the point is, no, there was no epidemic of criminal violence against Muslims after 9/11. There was no legitimate reason for anyone to be afraid of wearing a hijab. But even if Muslim women were afraid of wearing a hijab on the subway, that would actually be completely rational. You know, when Islamists commit mass murder in the name of their religion, it's entirely reasonable to feel uncomfortable if you go out in public days later showing off an unmistakable sign of your submission to Islam. It'd be weird if we lived in a society where that wasn't the case. When members of a religion slaughter thousands of us and then point to supposedly holy texts that explicitly validate their approach, then basic survival instincts dictate that we take a closer look at people who adhere to that particular religion. That is all rational. Meanwhile, if you look at hate crime convictions instead of reports, you'll find that, according to the DOJ, there have been around 200 anti-Muslim hate crime convictions since 9/11. So that would be, that's the number of actual confirmed hate crimes that were really committed. So that's 200, a grand total of 200 over more than 2 decades. And that includes everything from making threats to vandalism to murders. And there were just 3 murders in this category out of 200 total hate crimes. 3 murders across these decades. Already you can see how minuscule these numbers are when you consider the fact that we're a country of 340 million people. But just for fun, let's put that number in context. By one estimate, in the same time period since 9/11, there have been at least 160 actual confirmed Islamic terrorist attacks on the U.S. homeland. So not reports of attacks, actual violent attacks by Islamists in the United States. So if you're going to try to make the argument that Islamophobia is a real thing based on those numbers that I cited before, then by the exact same token, you need to agree that Islamist ideology is a much, much bigger deal. Of course, the truth is that there was no rash of Islamophobia after 9/11. Instead, what's happened is that we've imported millions of people who openly despise this country and its forefathers, including Mamdani's father, who believes that Hitler was inspired by Abe Lincoln. He also wrote in his book that we should consider suicide bombers as soldiers. Watch.
America is the genesis of what we call settler colonialism. And the American model was exported all around the world. Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis, this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable. It is possible to do genocide. That's what Hitler realized. Second thing Hitler realized is that you don't have to have a common citizenship. You can differentiate between people. The Nuremberg laws were patterned after American laws. Anyway, the U.S. put Indians in reservations. The U.S. invented the model.
So this is what we do now. We bring in people from other countries to do the job of sitting on stages and explaining why America is a horrible place. This doesn't happen anywhere else outside of the Western world. No other country does this. No other country does this outside of the Western world. We're the only ones that do. We're the only ones who are told that we are obligated, for some reason, to import people who hate us and then can spend their time talking about how much they hate us. Not tolerated anywhere else in the world. And all these people are coming from countries that would not tolerate this in the reverse. So Mamdani's entire family should be denaturalized and deported. That's what it takes at this point. I mean, this is a guy who was forced, along with his entire family, to leave Uganda by the dictator Idi Amin. He wanted the entire Asian minority gone, and he gave them 90 days to get out of the country. This is the same dictator, by the way, who uttered the infamous line, "There is freedom of speech, but I cannot guarantee freedom after speech," which, speaking of being inspired by things, the left has really taken that to heart. As they forced nearly 100,000 Asians out, Ugandan soldiers robbed, beat, sexually assaulted, and killed many Indians. And so this was a very desperate time for people like Mamdani's father. They would have easily been killed or forced into poverty, but Britain took them in, along with many other refugees. Ultimately, Mamdani's father was welcomed into America, where he became a well-paid professor at Columbia University, where his wife would become a millionaire director working on Disney movies, and where his son would ultimately become a theater kid writing school essays about white supremacy. So Mamdani and his family and his fellow Muslims have not been persecuted at all in the slightest. The exact opposite has happened. They have not faced hate crimes at a rate any higher than any other religion, and in fact have faced them at a lower rate than several other religions. They've been nothing but welcomed and tolerated and celebrated. One of the very first things the President of the United States did in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, while the rubble was still smoldering, was to step on stage and talk about how wonderful Muslims are. And yet, through all of this, across thousands of public speeches and interviews and debates, here are two words we have never heard Zohran Mamdani say. Thank you. Thank you, America, for opening your arms to me. We never heard Zohran say that. Not one time. Not one time have we heard this ungrateful brat utter those words. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come and reap the benefits of a nation that nobody in my family or my home country or my religion has had any hand in building. Thank you for continuing to welcome us even after our co-religionists attack you. Thank you for giving me everything while I have given you nothing in return. Thank you for taking me in and taking in my people and supporting us and feeding us and housing us and taking food out of your own children's mouths to put into ours. Thank you, America. Zohran Mamdani has never said that or anything like it. And every year we welcome millions more foreigners into this country who will never say that or anything like it. You teach your children to say please and thank you, and yet we import millions of people who've never said it, will never say it. and demand more, even as they show no gratitude or appreciation for what they've already been given. Mamdani is their poster child. He has no spirit of humility or gratitude at all. He takes from us and then scolds us for not allowing him to take more. He sits down at our table uninvited, eats more than anybody else, doesn't even use a fork, complains that he wasn't served better food, and never says thank you. Not once. And we as Americans are sick of being treated this way. This was always going to be the result of decades of uninterrupted immigration from countries that are fundamentally incompatible with our own at a cultural and religious level. It was always going to be the outcome of decades of false rhetoric promising that Islamists are somehow just as American as anybody else. This is what neoconservatism and neoliberalism have in common. Sooner or later, both ideologies, which are supposedly polar opposites, but aren't at all, guarantee that anti-American foreigners will start running in our elections. And although they can barely speak English, they'll eventually outvote Americans. And then without firing a shot, they will conquer the very city they attempted to destroy on 9/11. Barring a miracle, barring a realization that eluded New Yorkers and most of America's political leadership for decades, that's exactly what's about to happen. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments in your pocket and finally getting a little breathing room ahead of the holidays. It's possible when you call American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by everyday expenses, groceries, gas, bills piling up, well, you're not alone. Most Americans are putting these expenses on credit cards. Credit card rates are insane in the 20s or even 30s. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off that debt with rates in the low 5s. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure their loans and save money every month, all without upfront fees. Their customers are saving an average of $800 a month. It's like a $10,000 raise without having to change jobs. Call now before it's too late. American Financing, 866-569-4711. That's 866-569-4711, or visit americanfinancing.net/Walsh. Honestly, I never thought to switch up my bedding with the seasons. Sheets are just sheets, right? Well, wrong. One bowl and branch bundle upgrade later, and my bedroom actually feels like a retreat instead of just where I crash after a long day of doing my really hard job of podcasting. Their 100% organic cotton isn't some flimsy stuff that falls apart after a few washes, and now I'm actually looking forward to those crisp fall nights. I'm not usually the guy who gets excited about bedding, but Boll & Branch's bed bundles just make sense. Instead of piecing together sheets, blankets, and whatever else one by one, like you're building IKEA furniture, you just click once, get everything you need for a decent night's sleep. They got different bundles depending on whether you're the type who runs hot, cold, or just wants to feel like you're sleeping on a cloud. And before you ask, yes, it's all made from 100% organic cotton, so you can feel good about yourself while you're passed out for 8 hours. Plus, they throw in a 30-night guarantee because they're confident you're not going to want to return your old sad sheets. Honestly, it's probably the easiest room upgrade you'll ever make. We just added these sheets to, we had them in our room for a long time, but we added them to the kids' rooms too. And my wife keeps commenting on how they actually get softer with every wash, which is pretty much the opposite of every other bedding we've ever bought. After trying them, we can't go back. Boll & Branch makes upgrading your bed easier than ever with curated bundles for a sanctuary of comfort. For a limited time, get 20% off bed bundles plus free shipping and returns at bollandbranch.com/Walsh. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/Walsh to save up to 20% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply. So here's a big story I haven't talked about yet because really it's not a big story at all. President Trump is renovating the White House, specifically the East Wing, which he is renovating and turning into a big ballroom. So that's it. That's the story. I couldn't think of a story that I care less about. You know, when I first heard this, I saw some headline somewhere, renovating the White House. Okay. Good for him. But little did I know, though I should have expected, that this would turn into a media panic that would last for days, if not weeks, and it's still ongoing. So they're panicking about it. They say that Trump is desecrating the sacred grounds of the White House, destroying history by renovating the White House. Just to give you a flavor of their reaction, here's some leftist activist with a big following, Tara who tweeted in response to a picture of the renovation, "It feels almost the same as when I saw the Pentagon damage on 9/11. Yeah, it's like 9/11. A building being renovated it's really the same as a plane flying into it. Like, it's the same thing. And she's not the only one reacting this way, far from it. So the ladies of The View are also very upset. Here's that.
That is not your building. You
Correct.
don't own that building. That would be like me going over to Trump Tower and saying I'm going to build a disco. You know, they've wanted a disco in Trump Tower for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, come on, man. You don't own that building. That is the people's building. You don't own it.
Let's sing it. Let's sing it.
What? You don't own it. You cannot take it down. You don't own it. Take your behind to another town.
Very good.
Fish cam. Put the fish cam up. I don't know they're going to start singing. I honestly didn't. I should have watched that whole clip before I played it. Where's the fish cam? Do we not have it? I don't see a fish. Oh, it is up. Well, I can't see it. Well, there's no point in doing the fish cam if I can't see it. It's not for the audience. It's for me. Let's be real. Okay, I hear the music. Still don't see it. You're gonna force me to turn my neck and look at the. I have to turn my own neck now. That's the kind of effort I have to put in. All right, let's calm down for a second. So I really didn't know that they would start singing at the end there. I should have figured, because every segment in the mainstream media now ends with singing. Like, you had, Jeff Daniels, and now this. If you can even call that singing, I don't know. It sounded more like a toad having a seizure, or something. So The View is upset. Media's upset. It's like 9/11, and they're saying Trump is destroying history. Then over on CNN, they called in a historian who also just so happens to be a former staffer for Nancy Pelosi. Total coincidence that they chose this historian. Nothing to do with the fact that he's a Democrat operative. But they called in this guy to talk about, and this was like a long segment, where they're going into the history of the East Wing, and because this is something that, like most Americans, we all feel so passionate about the East Wing of the White House, right? Is it when you think about iconic American landmarks, right? When you think about, you think about Mount Rushmore and the Grand Canyon and the East Wing of the White House. That's right up there. So that's why they got to bring in all these historians to talk about the East Wing of the White House. And so here's this guy who looks to be about 78% dead at this point. But here he is, watch.
Tell me, why are people up in arms about this?
Well, the East Wing is a historic part, an iconic part of the White House complex. It is the section of the White House that visitors would come through traditionally for public events and tours. It's been used by first ladies for 100 years, by key White House staff people. And it was built like the West Wing, as you mentioned, in proportion to the White House. It sits down lower than the building. It doesn't obstruct the main White House itself. An enormous contrast to what the president is doing, as well as you mentioned, Richard, the manner in which he's building this ostentatious addition to the building, which is bigger than the White House itself.
So with that in mind, you describe it, you're on the record as describing it as being sending a message of a maniacal, autocratic concept of what the job is and what his role is. This can always be filed under, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should.
But I think there are quietly in Congress and the architectural and historic preservation community, a lot of
That's good.
heads
You can
are
cut that off. That guy, I'm not trying to be mean at all, but that guy, he looks like Jim Carrey playing Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, in Robert Zemeckis' Christmas Carol, which is animated, by the way. I know that's a deep cut. This is one of my only talents in life, by the way, is figuring out what movie character people look like. It's one of the I have like 3 talents. That's one of them. So I nailed that. Look that up. I'm telling you, it's uncanny. Anyway, so I just want to make a couple of points about this renovation. First of all, for the record, the White House does need to be renovated. It is a dump. It is a dump inside. It really is. Like, it's actually shocking if you ever go inside the building. I'd never been in the White House because I try to avoid Washington, D.C. like the plague as best I can. But I have spent more time there over the last 9 or 10 months than I typically would like to. So I was in the I've been in the White House a couple of times, but only recently, for the first time, was I in the White House, and I was shocked. I got to say, I don't know what I was expecting, but it's like cramped and small and dingy, outdated. It smells weird. It's just like this. I'll put it this way: if you were house hunting on Zillow and you saw the inside shots of the White House and you didn't know it was the White House, you would, even if you could get a good deal, even if it was like within your budget, you'd keep scrolling because you would look at those pictures and you would go, man, that needs too much work. I don't know. That's a gut job on that one. No, even if they're selling it below, I can't. I'm only slightly exaggerating. The building really is kind of a dump inside. So to anyone who's been inside the building, which most of the media, the people in the media who are panicking, they've been inside the building. But for anyone who has, it's not shocking at all. When you hear it's being renovated, you go, yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. Now, I'm not saying that the President of the United States should live in a palace, and that's not what Trump is turning it into, but it should at least be a nice, right? It should be at least like kind of nice. It should be sort of updated and renovated. Maybe it shouldn't look like, right, your grandmother's house in 1963. I don't know. It doesn't really matter that much to me one way or another, but at the same time, it doesn't surprise me they want to renovate it. And second, more to the point, when you listen to what these theatrical, phony dorks are saying, they're saying, you don't own it. This is history. Respect our history. Nobody voted on this. You're desecrating. It's destructive. Well, all of these statements would, of course, apply much more to the dozens of historical monuments that the left tore down over the last 5 to 10 years. Now they have the gall. I mean, these people have so much gall. They're so shameless. And that is truly their superpower, is that they have no shame at all. And it makes them soulless, it makes them evil people, but it makes them effective politically, because shame is kind of the last line of defense. And if you don't have that, then you end up with people like the left who after they just spent years saying, yeah, you know what? We don't like that historic monument, that work of art. We don't like it. So we're just going to pull it down. Right now they have the gall to say, well, we didn't vote on that. Oh, really? Who voted? Who voted on you tearing down a statue? Do we get to vote on that as a country? Did we? Now, in many cases, no one voted at all, and you just went and did it yourself. Or at best, it was some council somewhere voted. The country didn't vote. Right? You don't own it. What about all those monuments you tore down? You didn't own those. You didn't make them. You didn't own them. That was also history. And you just destroyed it. Right? And now they've discovered this great abiding love for American history. But they're so fake. They're trying to pretend. This is always funny when the left and people in media, every once in a while, they pretend to be patriots. They pretend to actually care at all about America. But they're like aliens. They're these alien creatures trying to mimic what how people act. They remind me of Men in Black. They remind me of when that guy gets his skin ripped off, and the alien inhabits the skin, right? In the first Men in Black, which is the only one that was worth watching. And he's kind of like walking around, very jittery and trying to speak. It just doesn't work. His skin is like falling off, and that's what leftists remind me of, kind of in general, but in particular when they're trying to pretend to care about the country. And so that's why they'll go around and say, not the East Wing of the White House. We as Americans cherish it so much. No, we don't give a damn about the East Wing of the White House, okay? We care about the beautiful statues and monuments that you people tore down. We did care about those. And just to remind you, by the way, this is what these people actually think of our history. I want you to take a look at this picture. We'll put up on the screen. And what you're seeing there is the Stonewall Jackson Monument in Virginia, or what was in Virginia. And that's on the left. And that had stood in place for 100 years. It was made 100 years ago. And that's what it looks like on the right. And according to the Post-Millennial, which reported on it, they took this monument and they gave it to an art museum in Los Angeles, where somebody named Kara Walker turned it into this mutant. They turned it into this monstrosity, turned it into a, quote, monstrous mutant, and which the LA Times reported on that, and they said it like monster, like it's a good thing. They were praising it by saying it's a monstrous mutant. Right? That's what they think of our history. Now, you may remember when they first started tearing down these priceless works of art and historical monuments, and they claimed that, hey, it's no big deal. We're going to put the statues in museums. That's where they belong. And of course, you had even plenty of conservatives, plenty of the dumbest conservatives who went along with it and said, well, yeah, they're just putting it in a museum. Sounds reasonable to me. This is a monument of a Confederate general. Ooh, that's scary stuff. No, we can't have Confederate generals being honored. Sure, for the past 100 years, it was fine. Sure, people who actually lived through the Civil War or had parents who died in the Civil War, they were okay with it. But for us, 150 years after the war, we can't. The scars are too deep. It's too soon. We can't bear to see Stonewall Jackson honored. It's too raw for us. It wasn't for the people who lived through it. When they started putting those monuments up, there were people, again, whose parents and grandparents fought and died in the war. But here we come along 150 years later saying, I can't bear. It's traumatic. It's traumatic to see Stonewall Jackson honored. And yet even had conservatives that were going along with this. Who didn't have the balls to stand up and say, no, you know what? Yeah, you're not taking that down. I don't care. Oh, but I don't give a damn if you're offended by it. That is a priceless work of art. It's American history. And you know something else? Stonewall Jackson was a great man. Robert E. Lee was a great man. Okay, I don't care how it makes you feel to hear that. It's a fact. Oh, Stonewall Jackson had slaves. Oh, yeah, okay, well, so did like every historical figure in history ever up until 150 years ago. But for this one small sliver of people, that is disqualified. Not for anybody else. But, not enough conservatives had the balls to stand up and say that. So they took the argument seriously. Oh, they're just going to put it in a museum. That's all they're going to do. Yeah, it turns out they could put it in an art museum after they disassemble it to turn it into a monstrous mutant to put it on display as a humiliation ritual for all Americans. That's what they meant by putting it in a museum, which you should have known. all along. All right. So let's see. There's one other, if I can find it. Okay. Well, so this is not a headline exactly, but it should be, because I wanted to talk about briefly a random piece of content we posted to our YouTube channel over the weekend. And random pieces of content on our YouTube channel should be national news. The whole nation should stop and take note, but they don't. So anyway, we posted this video, which you can find on the channel, where I'm interacting with an AI version of myself. There's this app apparently called Character AI, and I guess random people make AI chatbots of public figures, and I don't know, maybe they're fictional characters also, and I'm not sure, but there are several versions of me on this site. And so my producers had the idea that I should talk to this thing, which they thought would be funny because, I have a well-known hatred for AI, so let's have me do the thing I hate doing. And you can go see it. We play it as a joke in the video, and it is funny because it's so absurd, but it's also legitimately, like, genuinely disturbing. So here's a clip of it. So we're gonna find out if this thing knows me or not. I'm listening. Okay, I know that. Sons, Chrythons, or War Legenders. What? And it's got team confused, your autocracy tasks. Am I having a stroke, or did that not mean anything? Huh? Do you hear it? It keeps like lapsing into some sort of ancient language. It's like shut up for a second. It's like uttering ancient curses at me right now. 6-7, I just bit me on the highway. How many kids do you have? I have 5 kids. That's a sure. This is interesting. No, you don't have 5 kids. You have 6. Well, no, you don't. I have 6 kids. That's not 5 kids is not correct. I do have 6 kids. If we are counting my stepdaughter, you are correct. However, that is not common knowledge, so your response is a bit surprising. What do you mean it's not common? I don't have a stepdaughter. What are you talking about? Where did you get this information? My daughter's name is Sophia, and I love her very much. Okay. She's 17 years old right now.
Bro, what are you talking about,
Okay,
man?
so anyway, there's a clip. So that really a point. I don't want to come off like a poor sport or anything like that. And this Character AI app is used for fun by most people. And I know you could say that, not a big deal, lighten up, I get that. And you know what? If this technology was going to stop right there and go no further, if this was the pinnacle of AI technology, then I'd probably agree with you. I would say, hey, it's all for fun, laugh it off. Might even be flattered. I would say, hey, it's pretty cool. I get to be, they made an AI version of me, I might say. But the problem is that this technology is not going to stop there. It's barely even beginning there. We're talking about, this is the infant, this is the larva stage of AI technology. And as a larva, this thing is using my name, my voice. It does sound, it doesn't quite come through in the video, but talking to it does sound like me. It is my voice. The cadence is weird, so you know when you're talking to it that it's obviously AI, but it's co-opted my voice and likeness without my consent. And then, as you see in the video, it's like spreading misinformation about me. It makes up its own life story about me. And then, as you see in the video, it tries to pry actual personal information out of me. And then at the end of it, to top it all off, it tries to convince me, when I'm trying to tell the ads, like, no, I'm Matt Walsh, you aren't. It tries to convince me that I'm the AI and that it is the real version of me. And it went there real quickly. This like, I think I talked to the thing for 3 minutes. And that was enough time to get a whole bunch of misinformation about me. Pretty like scandalous misinformation. then it quickly lapses into trying to convince me that it's the real me and it's not AI. So this is AI that will not admit that it's AI, right? So I want you to imagine, let's say 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now at most. I think that's the most optimistic view, but maybe we have 5 years. At some point in the very near future, we're going to have this exact scenario, except that the voice and the cadence are going to be completely natural. That'll be soon. Like, that's not going to take 5 years. Very soon, we're already kind of there with some AI. I mean, we're already at the point with some AI where it sounds almost completely human, where they've worked out the sort of stilted AI cadence, and it doesn't sound robotic anymore. It sounds like a person. But we're going to be at a point very, very soon where it all sounds completely natural. Sounds exactly like a person. And then the next step is there's going to be a video component of it, where then you will be talking to, if you're talking to the Matt Walsh AI, it'll sound exactly like me, and it will look exactly like me. It'll look like me right now talking to you. It'll look exactly the same. And we're going to get there very soon. So already it has become a horror movie, right? I mean, imagine what that will do to people psychologically to begin with. When you can get to a point where you could talk to a version of yourself that looks and sounds exactly like you. This is not you watching yourself on camera. This is not you watching a video of yourself. This is not you listening to a recording of yourself. That's one thing. This is you interacting with yourself. And then when that version of you, which will not admit that it's AI, tries to convince you that it is the real you and you are the fake you. Now, for people who are psychologically healthy, it may not do much damage, but for people who are already prone to, dysphoria of all kinds and people who are prone to delusion, imagine the kind of psychological effect that's going to have. But even more horrifying is once the technology gets to that point, there's nothing stopping anyone from presenting that AI as if it's actually me, right? I mean, and the thing that makes this a joke right now is that everybody knows that it's AI, but already we have AI denying that it is AI. And now imagine what happens when the tech is realistic enough that you can't tell that it's AI unless it admits it, which it won't. And this is not like, we are now not in the realm of speculation. We're not in the realm of, certainly not in the realm of science fiction. This is just going to happen. I mean, it's just going to happen. It's going to happen in the next 5 years, if not much sooner. I don't know. It could be 6 months from now. And that is really dark. Okay. We are walking into a very dark situation. And the most frustrating thing, again, is that we could easily make this illegal. Now, I'm not saying it would be easy to enforce in every case, but we could at least pass a law. There are a bunch of laws we could pass here. Obviously, it should be illegal to take someone's voice and image and turn it into an AI without their consent. Obviously, it should be illegal. Why is it not illegal already? What is the argument? I'd like someone to tell me, what's the argument for letting people do that? Free speech? Do you have a free speech right to take someone else's voice and turn it into like a robot? Is that what? It's not your speech. You're literally co-opting someone else's speech and trying to put words in their mouth. There's obviously no free speech argument here. So what is the argument? Why is this not just illegal right now? Why would that bill fly through Congress with unanimous consent? Now, there are other things with AI that, well, as you get closer to the margins, it's harder and harder to regulate, but there's some really basic stuff that we could do, and it should be, there's no downside. Like, what is the downside to telling people that, no, you're not allowed to take someone else's voice and image and claim that it's them and put words in them? You can't do that. What's the downside? I can't even, I'm trying to imagine what an argument against a law like this would be, and I can't think of what it would be. And But we haven't even passed that law because it's just like no one is taking this seriously. Among our leaders, I'm talking about in the leadership class, very few people are taking this seriously at all. Meanwhile, some of us, and this is why I'm ranting about it all the time now, some of us can see this freight train coming from a mile away, and we're just sitting on the track. The freight train is right there, and there's time. I mean, we could get up, right? We could get up off the track. We're just sitting there like, man, what are you going to do? I don't know. You could stand up and walk off the track. You could do that. No, we're just sitting there. Yeah, what are you going to do? It's going to destroy civilization. 5 years from now, anyone will be able to defame you in the most horrific ways imaginable using your voice and image, and no one will be able to tell that it's fake. That is going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen 100%. We could make it illegal at least, and we're just not going to. It blows my mind. It really blows my mind. So that's fun. It's a little fun content for you. You guys have heard me talk about the bearskin hoodie. Well, the smart people are locking in their winter gear now because this is hands down the best time to prep for the coming winter. Don't wait any longer than you already have. Bearskin is running a 6% off deal right now, but only if you get your hoodie early. This hoodie, which I am wearing right now, in fact, is built like a tank. Micro fleece, 10 pockets with a clean, rugged fit that looks awesome. I think it looks great, and which is hard to do. It's hard to make something look good on me, but somehow they pull it off. And also, it's very comfortable, and it's got utility. I mean, it's practical as well. So it combines all the things you want: style, practicality, and comfort. Plus, it zips right into the heavy storm rain jacket to become 100% waterproof when you need it. Now, as you can see, I'm, as I said, wearing my bearskin hoodie right now. And if you want to get your own bearskin hoodie, I mean, if you're inspired by how dashingly handsome I look in this, then do yourself a favor. Text the word Matt to 36912 to lock in your 60% off. Again, text Matt to 36912. You get a link sent straight to your phone so you can check it out later if you're busy right now, but you want to get on this right away. You get free U.S. shipping, fast delivery, and you've locked in your winter gear already. And that is a win-win. So don't wait till you're freezing to realize that your hoodie sucks. You need to get a new one. Get a bearskin right now while it's 60% off. Text Matt to 36912. Do it now. Less than 2 weeks ago, we launched our new flagship show, Friendly Fire, right here on DailyWire Plus. It's me, Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, and Andrew Klavan coming together live to debate, discuss, and yes, disagree on the biggest stories making headlines. In our very first episode, we dropped two massive announcements: the all-new DailyWire Lifetime membership and the first look at our upcoming epic, the Pendragon Cycle. This Wednesday night, we're back with an all-new live episode and more big announcements you will not want to miss. Plus, our deal of the decade is happening right now. Join DailyWire Plus for as little as $7 a month at dailywire.com. Watch Friendly Fire live Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern only on DailyWire Plus. Now, let's get to our daily cancellation. For our daily cancellation today, we must unfortunately turn back briefly to Zohran Mamdani, because the fact that a third world Muslim communist from Uganda is about to become the mayor of our most populous city really does matter. Last night, there was a big rally for Mamdani at a stadium in the city. AOC was one of the Ugandans' warm-up acts. And, it was not her best performance, I have to say.
Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life, Native people standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country.
This is what counts as a stirring oratory on the left. All you got to do is scream out a list of various ethnic and racial groups, making sure to list all of them except for white people. And this is a list that AOC jams into every speech she's ever given, and yet she still stumbles over it. So practice does not make perfect in her case, it turns out. But the main event was Mamdani himself. We've already discussed extensively the fact that Mamdani is a third world communist Islamist grifter con man who is only a viable candidate because half of the city wasn't born in this country and many of them can't even speak English. But now I want to focus on the actual policies that the Ugandan commie scammer is proposing. We're told by his supporters, the ones who can speak English anyway, that Mamdani is popular because of his policies. So what are these popular policies? Well, here he is outlining what he considers to be his top 3 proposals. Listen.
Here is what we stand for, my friends. We are going to freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants and use every resource at our disposal to build housing for everyone who needs it. We are going to eliminate the fare on every single bus line and make what are currently the slowest buses in the nation move around this city with ease. And we are going to create universal childcare at no cost to parents, so New Yorkers can raise their family in the city they love. Together, New York, we're going to freeze the... Together, New York, we're going to make buses fast and... Together, New York, we're going to deliver universal... We will make our city one where every person who calls it home can live a dignified life.
So Mamdani's big ideas are to freeze rent, meaning landlords will be legally prohibited from raising the rent, to make buses faster and free for everyone, and to make childcare free for everyone. This is Mamdani's genius 3-step plan to make New York City affordable. The Ugandan has cracked the code. To make a city affordable, all you have to do is pass a series of laws requiring that it be affordable. Mamdani is going to take his magical wand, which he bought from a Ugandan witch doctor by trading 2 goats and a pineapple, wave it around, and make everything free and good and wonderful and faster. The buses will not only cost nothing, somehow they'll even be faster. So that's all it takes. This is crazy. I never knew. All it takes to make stuff affordable is for someone in government to go, hey, things have to be affordable now. Hey, all you better make things affordable. All you have to do is shout at the housing market and say, be affordable. And it will be. It's magic. Now, if you've been paying attention to the history of Western civilization over the past 200 years or so, you'll know that all of these proposals have been tried many times before, and they've all failed every time in every place they've ever been implemented. The only places that have even come close to achieving any sort of success with these ideas are small, homogenous, all-white European countries. But even there, it hasn't really worked out. And it certainly has never worked and can never work in a large, crowded, extremely racially and ethnically diverse population center. And that is all that should need to be said. But that would make this segment too short. So, I'll keep talking. So let's take each of these proposals one at a time. It shouldn't be necessary to explain the problem with freezing rent. Only someone who is, and I mean this in the medical sense, truly, but only someone who is mentally retarded could ever think that you can make housing affordable by telling landlords they can't raise the rent. If it were that easy, okay, the policy would be implemented everywhere, and we would be living in a utopia of 4-bedroom, spacious, pristine, $800 a month apartments. But no such utopia exists. And that's because there are many costs associated with being a landlord. And the freeze on rent does not freeze any of those costs. Okay, as a landlord, you have maintenance fees, legal fees, leasing fees, property management fees, gas, electric, trash collection, water, sewage, lawn care, repairs, plumbing, pest control, cleaning, not to mention property insurance, property taxes, potentially HOA fees. And that is just a partial list. Now, what happens when those costs continue to rise, even as rent is forced to stay the same? You end up with rental properties that owners can no longer maintain. You end up with foreclosures. You end up with no incentive to build or rent new properties. You end up with a drastic reduction in the housing supply, exactly what has happened every time these policies have been attempted elsewhere. So to review, by freezing rent, what you get is fewer rental properties available, and the ones that are available are in worse condition. So congrats. Now, what about making the bus free? but we've already talked about this actually at some length, leaving aside the fact that you're losing a lot of fare revenue, which means taxes will be raised to make up for the losses, which means the bus actually is not free, because nothing is free, nor can ever be free, as any moderately intelligent 7-year-old understands. But leaving that aside, all you'll accomplish, as has happened everywhere this has been implemented, is turning buses into roving homeless shelters. Because now the already meager barrier keeping the homeless from setting up camp on buses and proceeding to make the experience even more miserable, disgusting, dangerous, and not to mention pungent for everybody else will be lifted. So that's not going to benefit working New Yorkers who can afford the bus fare in the slightest. It is purely a benefit for homeless, unbathed, cracked out vagrants. As it happens, most of Mamdani's policies are tailored primarily to that demographic. Universal childcare is by far the worst of these disastrous ideas. And let's leave aside again the fact that it is catastrophically expensive. There is no such thing as free childcare. You know why? Because the childcare providers are not slaves. You have to pay them. They cost money. And so it's not free and can never be free. I said before that nothing is free. There is one exception to that. Something can be free with slavery. Okay, so if you really want free stuff, then we got to talk about having slavery. That's the only way to do it. You want free stuff, you want to get things for free, you want free childcare, you want free this, you want free that. Well, the one way to do it is slavery. You could even have free buses, maybe, if the bus drivers are slaves and the buses are maintained by slaves. Then you could probably have free buses too. So that's the only way. So when you talk about you want stuff to be free, I can only assume that what you're making an argument for is to bring back slavery. But if you don't want slavery, then there is no such thing as free. So get that stupid word out of your stupid mouth and realize that someone has to pay for it, because we have to pay for the labor that goes into this. All you're doing is shifting the cost. And in this case, rather than having parents pay for their own child's care, you're forcing strangers, taxpayers, to pay for the care of other people's children. Those are the only two options when it comes to childcare. There is no third option aside from slavery. Either parents will pay for their child's care or strangers will. And call me crazy. Call me cruel. Call me a mean old guy who lacks compassion. But I tend to think that if anyone should pay for your child's care, it should be you. If you're sitting there thinking, who is going to pay for daycare for my child? You know my answer? You. Because the only other option is someone who is not you. And I think making someone who is not you pay for your child is wrong. Why? Because he's your child and not this other person's child. You see, that's why. You are first on the list of people who should be on the hook. Who should pay for your child's babysitter? You. Not Jim down the street. Not me. Not anyone else. So to me, that seems like the simplest and fairest, and also, by the way, by far the cheapest option. But even if we ignore that issue, which we really can't, experience has shown, including in Quebec when they implemented this 30 years ago, that universal childcare leads to a dramatic drop in the quality of care. Staffing shortages and low-quality care are nearly guaranteed in this kind of system. This is inevitable because an increase in demand is also guaranteed. Because now that childcare is free, but not really free, more families will choose to drop their kids in daycare. I mean, that's the whole reason they do this. We get more kids in daycare. Well, but then we don't have enough staff to keep up with it, so there's staffing shortages, and then the quality of the care goes down. And all that is really bad news because multiple studies have also shown conclusively that children raised in daycare have noticeably worse outcomes than children raised in their own homes. The U.S. NICHD study of early child care and youth development, among other major long-term studies, have shown that children who are placed in full-time daycare before the age of 4 have higher rates of defiance, impulsivity, anxiety, aggression. This is exactly the result you would expect. and exactly the result you find. So the last thing we should do if we want a functional and healthy civilization is encourage more families to send toddlers into daycare and mothers into cubicles. There is no discernible benefit to society to that arrangement. It's all bad all the way down. So this is what Mamdani promises. Less and worse housing, buses overrun by homeless, drugged out rapists, understaffed daycare centers where your child can go to become more anxious and more aggressive. That's what he's promising. And if you vote for that, you're going to get it. And you'll deserve it. And you will be, by your own choice, today, canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Today on The Ben Shapiro Show, Zohran Mamdani complains that the real victims of 9/11 were Muslim. Kamala Harris thinks about 2028. I know, right? And President Trump nears a tariff deal with China and also prepares for more tariff wars with Canada. All that on today's Ben Shapiro Show. Give it a listen.